Dr. Night Echoes.
Good evening, all. Tonight, I'm sharing a set of home alone paranormal encounters. Moments when the house was quiet and something else was awake. I hid under my little sister's bed because I thought no one would check there. The room was dim, and it felt even darker once I slid all the way in. I pulled my legs close and tried to stay quiet. I could hear my siblings running around the house, opening and closing doors, laughing and yelling. Everything sounded normal. Under the bed, it felt cramped and dusty. The carpet smelled old. I could hear the ceiling fan turning above me. The room itself was too quiet compared to the rest of the house. I kept my eyes open and watched the boxes, the blanket hanging down, and the small strip of light near the floor. I knew I was alone because there wasn't enough space for anyone else to hide beside me. I heard someone stop outside the door. The handle clicked like someone touched it, but the door didn't open. It stayed still. I thought it was my brother trying to mess with me, so I didn't move. Then I heard a giggle, a small, soft giggle. It came from right next to me. It sounded like a little girl laughing under her breath. It was so close it felt like the sound was right by my ear. I froze. I knew no one was under the bed with me. There wasn't even room for someone to squeeze in, but the giggle was real. It sounded warm and close, like someone was lying right beside me. I slowly turned my head, even though I didn't want to. I didn't see anything, just the dark underside of the mattress and the box next to me. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. I pushed myself out as fast as I could and scraped my shoulder on the frame. I stood up and looked around the room. It was empty. My siblings were still running around in the hallway like nothing strange had happened. I never hid in that room again, and I still remember how close that giggle sounded, and how whatever made it never moved at all. A few years ago, I was home from college for the weekend, and even though my childhood house was over 100 years old and had its share of strange moments, nothing ever scared me like this night. I got home around 11 after seeing my girlfriend, went upstairs quietly so I wouldn't wake anyone, shut my door, and sat at my piano with headphones on. After a few minutes of playing, I was suddenly hit with this intense fear, alarmed like someone was standing right behind me watching. I kept looking over my shoulder until I finally stopped playing and got into bed. Not long after turning off the lights, I heard a loud slam from downstairs. A hard, sharp sound, like a door hitting the frame. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room, slow and steady, moving toward the stairs. I heard each step going down, and then the downstairs door open and close. I thought it was my dad checking the noise, but when I opened my door, my mom was coming back up. She thought I had slammed the door because she heard it too, and when I told her I'd been home for almost an hour, she went silent.
I still don't know what walked down that hallway or what made that noise, but that was the first time in that house I felt real, lingering fear. The kind that stays in your chest long after the night is over.
We were at a birthday party, and someone suggested hide and seek. The house had this long, wall-length closet with sliding doors, so a few of us decided to squeeze in there. I went in first and moved all the way to the far end. It was tight and smelled like old fabric. I could hear the other girls climbing in behind me, bumping into each other, whispering and laughing. When everyone was inside, We slid the door shut. It got quiet fast. Not silent, just that muffled kind of quiet where you can hear your own breathing. I could barely move because there were clothes on both sides of me, brushing my face every time I shifted. I kept my hands close to my stomach so I wouldn't accidentally grab anything and freak myself out. A few minutes passed and no one talked. We were trying to stay still so the seeker wouldn't hear us. I leaned against the back wall and stared into the dark. I could hear the girls whispering on the other end, maybe 4 feet away, but I couldn't see them. It was too cramped to even turn around. Then I felt something touch my back. At first, I thought it was a hanger poking through a jacket, but it wasn't sharp or stiff. It was soft. It pressed flat against me. A hand. A human hand. I felt the weight of each finger through my shirt, slow and steady, like someone was placing it there on purpose. I froze. I didn't breathe. I waited for one of the girls to laugh or say something, but no one did. The hand just stayed there, warm and still. I finally whispered, "Whose hand is that?" All of them answered at the same time from the opposite side. "What?" Their voices were far away, too far for any of them to be behind me. I felt the hand lift off me, almost like whoever it belonged to pulled back slowly so I wouldn't notice. But I did. I felt every second of it. I didn't say anything else. None of us did. We just slid the door open and got out as fast as we could. I still think about how close that hand was and how it was already touching me before I even asked. I used to work as a utility locator with my dad. A lot of older houses kept the gas meter down in the basement, so sometimes I had to go down alone and hook up the equipment while he found the gas line outside. It was normal for us. Nothing weird ever happened. This one day, we get to a house where the owner tells me the basement stairs are right inside. I head down. It's dim, but I can see the gas meter sitting in the corner. 2 short walls were built around it, almost like a little open closet. Behind the meter, halfway up the cinder block wall, there was a crawl space opening. No lights, just a black square, big enough for something to be inside it. I stepped into the meter area, leaned in to grab the pipe, and I heard it. A low, deep growl came from that crawl space. Not like a dog warning you off. This was harsher, almost vibrating. It sounded angry. I froze for a second, then slowly backed out. I didn't want my dad to think I was freaking out over nothing, so I called him and said I needed a flashlight. He hung up before I could say anything else. I stayed right at the doorway, reached one arm in, and clipped the equipment on without stepping back inside. My dad came down a minute later. He stepped through the doorway to check if I had it hooked up right. As soon as he leaned in, the growl came again. Same sound, same direction. It was louder this time, like whatever was in there knew he was closer. He jumped back so hard he almost knocked me over. He shoved the flashlight into my hand and walked straight back up the stairs without saying a word. I stood there, pointing the light into the crawl space. The beam didn't reach the end of it. It was just a black hole with dirt and broken stone around the edges. The whole time, I felt like something was staring back at me from inside, completely still. Then my dad called and said he was done outside. I grabbed the equipment as fast as I could, didn't even look into the crawl space again, and went straight up. I don't know what made that sound, but it wasn't a dog or a raccoon or anything you'd expect in a basement, and I haven't heard anything like it ever again. I grew up with my grandmother. After she passed, I stayed in her house for a while. One morning I was cleaning the hallway. It was quiet. No TV, no music, just the usual old house noises. I was dusting a shelf when I heard a soft creak from her room. It wasn't loud, just the kind of floorboard sound you hear when someone shifts their weight. I stopped for a second, but I told myself it was nothing. Old houses make noises. I kept cleaning, but a few seconds later I heard something else. A cough. Not just any cough. It was the same cough my grandmother had. She'd had it for years, and I could recognize it instantly. It had that sharp start and a low, tired finish. I heard it every single day growing up. I stood completely still. I waited to see if it would happen again. The house went silent. I felt this cold, heavy feeling in my chest, like I had walked into the wrong place at the wrong time. I knew no one else was in the house. The doors were locked. The windows were shut. There was no TV on anywhere. I hadn't stepped into her room since the day she died, and now I was hearing her cough from behind a closed door. I walked away from the hallway and sat in the living room for a while, trying to convince myself I imagined it. But the sound was too clear, too familiar. I grew up listening to that exact cough from across the house. I knew what I heard. I never went near her room again after that. I cleaned around it, but I didn't touch the doorknob. The house stayed quiet after that day, but every time I passed by the door, I felt like someone was standing just on the other side, waiting. The house I grew up in sat on what used to be an old boarding school campus. There was a cemetery right next to it, and everyone joked about it being ancient burial ground. But honestly, it didn't feel like a joke when you were alone there at night. One night, I was walking up the stairs, and the whole place was dark except for a light in the living room. I was halfway up when I heard someone whisper my name, clear, soft, right from the top of the staircase, like someone was standing just out of sight, leaning over the railing. I stopped and waited for it again, but nothing else happened. The house was completely still. I didn't go up the rest of the way. I turned around and went back down like nothing happened, but the hairs on my arms stayed up for a long time. This was at a different house later on, but the same kind of thing happened again. I was drifting off to sleep one night with both of my dogs in the room, a pit bull and a husky. They were both calm at first. The room was quiet, and I was almost asleep. Then the pit bull suddenly got up and started growling. Not a warning growl. This one was low and steady, like he was staring at something he didn't want coming any closer. He wasn't looking at the husky. He was facing the closet, his whole body stiff. I had never heard him growl like that before. I said his name, and he came over to me, but kept staring at the closet while he laid down. His head stayed up. His ears were forward. He didn't relax until I kept my hand on him for a long time. I didn't hear anything from the closet, but the way he acted made me feel like something had been standing there in the dark. A while later, my parents told me they had seen an older woman in the house a couple of times. Just glimpses, usually in doorways or near the hallway. They said it casually, like it was nothing, but it hit me hard, because they didn't know what had happened with my dogs. I still think about that whisper on the stairs, and whatever my dogs saw in the closet. It was around 10 on a Saturday morning. I was half awake in bed, petting my cat because he had shoved the door open like he always did. I was looking at him when I saw my dad walk past the kitchen entrance. There's no door there, just an open frame, so you can see the whole space from my room. He walked by fast, wearing his usual lazy-at-home clothes, big black shorts and an old, stretched-out t-shirt. For a second, I wondered why he wasn't at work. Then I noticed something that didn't make sense. He wasn't wearing his glasses. My dad can't see anything without them. He never moves around the house without them. I figured maybe he was sick or half asleep.
It bothered me enough that I actually got out of bed to check on him. My cat gave me this annoyed look as I stepped over him, but I ignored it and walked into the hall. I called out, "Dad?" No answer. I walked into the kitchen, expecting to see him by the counter or leaning on the table, but the room was empty, completely empty. The sunlight was bright on the floor. Everything looked untouched, like no one had walked through it all. I checked the other rooms, thinking maybe he'd moved fast or I had just missed him. Nothing. No one was home. Every door was still locked from the inside. The house had that strange quiet where you can immediately tell you're alone. I went back to the kitchen doorway and stood there, replaying what I saw. I knew it was him. Same walk, same shape, same clothes. But the glasses thing wouldn't leave my mind. He physically can't move around without them. I wasn't terrified. It was more like a heavy, cold realization that the person I saw wasn't someone who should have been there. Like my brain recognized the shape, but the details didn't belong to a real person. Turning that corner, expecting to talk to him, and seeing nothing but that bright, empty room. It stuck with me. I still remember how sure I was that someone had just walked through, and how wrong the silence felt right after. I used to get bad sleep paralysis years ago, but one night was worse than anything I've ever experienced. I woke up around 4:30 a.m., completely unable to move, staring at my open bedroom door. The hallway outside was dark and quiet at first, and then I heard it. The fast, light footsteps of two small children running toward my room. They were laughing and squealing like they were playing a game. I couldn't move at all. I could only listen as they got closer and closer, and my fear shot straight through me. Before I could even process it, they ran right through the doorway and up onto my chest. I felt the pressure, the weight of little feet hitting me, like they ran across me without slowing down. Then they turned sharply and bolted back into the hallway, still laughing. Their footsteps faded, and for a moment, I thought it was over. But then they started running toward me again. I felt pure panic building up, knowing I couldn't move or turn my head or stop any of it. They raced over me a second time, and then again, like they were looping the same path, playing some kind of game I wasn't part of. It repeated once or twice before I finally snapped out of the paralysis and could move again. The moment my body unlocked, I started gasping like I'd just been dragged out of deep water. I was shaking and completely disoriented. I don't believe in ghosts, and I didn't see anything with my eyes, but I heard them, and I felt them. I wasn't imagining footsteps. I wasn't imagining the weight on my chest. It was real enough to leave me terrified long after the sun came up. I lived in an old apartment back then, over 100 years old, on the third floor of what used to be a Victorian townhouse. People said the top floor in houses like that was where the children slept. The house was built right before the Spanish flu. Sometimes I wonder if that really was just sleep paralysis. And sometimes I think it wasn't.
I live in a small house next to my dad's place. Both houses are surrounded by woods, and at night it gets pitch black and dead quiet. I've lived there my whole life, but being alone out there can still get to me, especially after midnight. This happened about a year ago. It was late, well past midnight, and I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep. I wasn't fully out yet. My eyes were closed, and I was thinking about something random when I heard it. A scream. Not a normal scream. Not human. Not animal. It was so loud it felt like it hit the roof of my house. It sounded like it came from right above me, like something passed directly over the house as it screamed. I froze. I didn't move at all. The sound was sharp and deep at the same time, like a mix of someone in pain and an animal roaring. I can't even describe it right. It didn't sound like anything that belongs in the woods. It didn't sound like anything I've ever heard in my life. The part that scared me the most was that I heard it moving. It wasn't coming from one spot. It traveled through the air, fast. It started on one side of the house, shifted over me, and then shot off into the distance in less than a second. Like something huge flew by screaming at full speed. Then everything went quiet. Completely quiet. I sat up in bed with my heart pounding so hard it made me feel sick. I turned on every light I could reach without getting out of bed. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just kept listening, waiting for it to happen again. The next morning, I told my dad. Before I even finished, he said he heard it too. He said he actually ran to the window when he heard it because he thought something was attacking the house. He didn't see anything outside, just darkness and trees. Neither of us knows what it was. There aren't any animals here that make a sound like that, and nothing moves that fast in the air. We even joked later that it was a witch flying over the woods, but honestly, we were only joking to calm ourselves down. I still think about it sometimes when the woods get too quiet, and I still sleep with a light on more nights than I'd like to admit.